So, 2019, it's come to a close. It has been a great year for film. Probably one of the best in recent memory now that I think about it. And there have been some great franchise movies, but also just some great original movies that have come out of nowhere. I decided to take all the new releases that I saw this year and put them in a list from worst to best and do a video about it because lists are just fun. Everyone enjoys watching a video about a list. There are a few movies that I wish I'd seen, like particularly 1917 and Parasite. Those are two that I really wanted to see, but they did not come out in my hometown. They don't come out until later in January, so wasn't able to get to those just because I want to release this video while it's still relevant and not, into January. So I saw 24 new releases this year, and I have them in a list right here. Kind of going to fly through the first few, the ones that I have towards the bottom of the list, because not much to say about them, but as we get closer, I'll give a little more in-depth on my thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoy this list. So at number 24 on the list, we have Velvet Buzzsaw, directed by Dan Gilroy, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and a few other people. I didn't like this movie. I think it was the first one I saw. I was pretty excited because this director and actor team-up also made Nightcrawler a few years back, which I loved, but this one just did not do it for me at all. Number 23, we have The Report, starring Adam Driver. This is an Amazon original. Pretty boring. I described it as 20% an actual movie and 80% an episode of Designated Survivor. I don't like Designated Survivor, so I wasn't a big fan of this movie, but Adam Driver's great in it, but I mean, anybody could have played the character. It's just kind of one of those movies. At number 22, we have Dark Phoenix, the last movie in the Fox era of X-Men movies. I didn't hate it as much as a bunch of other people did, but it's nothing to write home about, that's for sure. Number 21. This one hurts my heart. If you guys have watched me for a while, you probably know, big Star Wars fan. So when I say that Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is number 21 on my list, that's never a good sign. I plan on doing a whole video about this movie or just the franchise in general, but what I will say is a review that I read that I think perfectly sums it up, and that is the only Star Wars movie ever written by Reddit. I think that pretty well sums up how I feel about this movie. Number 20, we have Captain Marvel. It's Captain Marvel. It's pretty bland. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. It was just your typical bare minimum Marvel movie. So you have that. At number 19, we have Triple Frontier. This movie came out earlier in the year, and I just got around to seeing it because it's on Netflix, and I wanted to kind of see as many movies as possible before the end of the year. It's alright, it has some cool sequences, but it's nothing really to write home about. It has some cool visuals. I really like the aesthetic of the movie, this kind of rainforest area, but, it was a movie. It was what you expect from the trailer. Number 18, we have Glass, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. This is the last movie in the kind of Unbreakable trilogy. Started with Unbreakable, then you had Split, and now you have Glass. I really enjoyed this movie. I think I liked it a lot more than most people did. James McAvoy continues to be great in this role as a character who has split personality disorder. It's pretty great watching him act in this character. I really enjoyed the first two acts, but it is that third act that just kind of drags it down. Number 17, we have Ad Astra. This movie stars Brad Pitt, and I was really looking forward to it. Same cinematographer who did Interstellar, and that movie looked amazing. This movie looks great too. Pretty slow though. That's my big takeaway from it. And I went in hearing that it was slow, but I wasn't prepared for how slow it was. So I would like to give this one a rewatch, just knowing how slow it's going to be. And also there was a random scene with a chimpanzee in space, kind of like a fight scene, that I can only think was in there because they didn't think there was enough action, but it feels completely out of place. It definitely gave you a lot to think about by the end of the movie, so again, that's one I definitely want to rewatch. Number 16, we have Shazam. This is just a super fun movie. You've probably seen it. It's a blast. If you haven't seen it, recommend you watch it. Watch it with your family or something, somewhere. It's a fun, like, Christmas time movie, I guess. Even though it came out in, I think, April. Zachary Levi is fantastic in this role. I think you can put him up there with Robert Downey Jr. and Ryan Reynolds when it comes to, like, perfect casting for a superhero role. Number 15, we have Netflix's The King. Now, I heard a lot of people didn't like this movie. Don't get me wrong, I didn't love it, but it was definitely worth the watch. And for the last 20 minutes or so, you kind of expect it to just end after the big final battle. There's a little bit of residual storytelling to wrap up, and I think it wraps it up really well. It gives you some intriguing stuff towards the end, so I definitely recommend you watch it, especially since it's free on Netflix. Number 14, this is a movie I caught later on in the year just because I'd heard good things about it. That is The Farewell. This movie visually was one of the best movies I saw this year. Just very vibrant colors, the city streets of China, where a lot of this movie takes place, look great. This movie is actually based on the director's life, and she wrote the script and directed the movie kind of about what happened to her, and it's very, very interesting. I didn't love it, but it's certainly worth the watch. Number 13, we have Us. I really wanted to love this movie, especially because Jordan Peele, who directed it, also directed Get Out. Us has just as much hidden detail as Get Out did, where you can watch the movie again and see, oh, that meant this, but what keeps me from loving it is you have to suspend your disbelief so much, and I just can't do that because there are so many things in this movie that don't add up, but 100% worth the watch. I think I've said that for the last few movies. It's a really fun movie. Number 12, we have Little Women. I didn't love this movie as much as everybody else seems to have. I grew up with the Winona Ryder movie from the 90s, and that one kind of holds a special place in my heart, I guess. Something interesting that this one tried, though, was to have the sections where the girls are younger and older kind of interspliced. And so instead of, in the 90s one, it's, you know, them all being young and then later they're all old, it cuts back and forth. But what I think that does, unfortunately for me, is kind of like a tonal inconsistency where it goes from warm, happy childhood to like really cold, depressing adulthood, and it cuts back and forth so much that you're kind of like confused, tonally confused. So that was my only critique with Little Women, but really enjoyed it. Performances were great. Definitely worth a watch. Number 11, this is one where I'm apparently supposed to hate this movie, but I just can't. And that is The Goldfinch. First 30 minutes definitely took some getting into, and the characters are very unlikable and pretentious in the beginning. And then the last 20 minutes feel like they're from a different movie, but everything in between, I can't help but love. I stood up after having seen this movie in the theater, and I felt like I had been in the theater for like 6 hours, which is normally a terrible thing, but I really liked it. I felt like I'd watched someone from childhood to adulthood, and it was like, you could look back and be like, wow, that was really kind of like an epic scale story. Apparently a lot of people were super bored by this movie, and so take that as you will. I think it's worth a watch. I said it again. Okay, getting into the top 10, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. This one I loved when I first saw it, and after sequential viewings, still like it a lot, don't love it anymore. The Mysterio stuff is definitely some of my favorite stuff in the MCU. Those visions where he's messing with Spider-Man, some of the best stuff in the MCU. Number 9, we have Joker. This movie is confusing to me because when I left the theater, I was like, okay, that's definitely one of the best, from a filmmaking standpoint, one of the best movies I've seen so far this year. But at the same time, I didn't enjoy watching it, if that makes sense. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to see that again, just because it's so dark. So this is one of those things where it's like, do you put it higher on the list because of your enjoyment level or how well it's made? I put it at number 9 just because I think it's very well made, and obviously Joaquin Phoenix is amazing as the Joker, but at the same time, I didn't love watching it. So it's number 9, I think, is a good place for it. Definitely want to watch it again, though. Number 8, we have the most recent movie that I've seen on this list, and that is The Irishman. You've probably heard about the 3.5-hour runtime and all the de-aging CGI that they did to the characters. Really, once the first 10 minutes go by, you don't notice it that much anymore. And the 3.5-hour runtime is felt, especially towards the middle of the movie, because there's a lot of terminology thrown at you, there's a lot of business dealings happening, and a lot of new characters coming in all the time. So I was pretty lost, I'm going to be honest. I was pretty lost for like a solid hour of this movie. Just trying to figure out what people's motivations were, what were they doing at this place, but it does get you back on track in the last 30, 40, 50 minutes. I think the last 20 minutes are some of the best of the year. Just a lot of self-reflection. As this movie takes place over decades, you get to the end of the movie and the end of the timeline, and you're looking back to everything that's happened, and it's kind of a lot of reflection, a lot of interesting things to think about. I think this one probably deserves to be higher on the list when it comes to how it was made and the actual talent behind it. But again, there was just that solid hour where I was kind of lost just because there was so much stuff happening. So that kind of hindered my enjoyment, but I'll definitely rewatch it at some point. Number 7, we have Avengers Endgame. Again, like Joker, this is one where do I grade it based off the filmmaking or how much I enjoyed it? Because from a filmmaking level, I think this movie is not going to age very well. I think in 10 years, people are going to look back and not really think of this movie very highly. Just because it is so long, and I think there are certainly scenes that can be trimmed out, and I think there's some tonal stuff that doesn't really match. There are a lot of jokes that I think don't fit in there. But when it comes to the last hour, if you've seen the movie, which you definitely have, you know what I'm talking about. The last hour, as a fan of these movies, is just it's everything you've ever wanted, and the emotional payoff of the last 10 minutes or so, it really knocks the movie up a few pegs for me. Those first 2 hours are kind of just like good. They're not great, they're good. And then the last hour kicks in, and that's when everything comes out and becomes great. Number 6, this movie has gone from way lower on my list, and every time I think about it, it just gets better and better, and that's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino. This movie I walked out of enjoying, but not loving, just because it's so character-centric, and there's almost no story at all. There's no plot running through the whole thing. But there was one thing that someone said after I saw the movie, and that was that it's a fairy tale, and now I just want to watch the movie again with that in mind, because it's a way more enjoyable way of watching the movie, I think. And I keep saying this, but the last 20 minutes of this movie are just, I want to watch them on repeat for the rest of my life. Getting into the top 5, we have number 5, and that is Uncut Gems. This is one movie I wasn't even planning on seeing this year, but I had a free day, and I heard it was getting a lot of good buzz, so I was like, I'm gonna go see Uncut Gems, and I loved it. I didn't love it walking out of the theater, but this is one of those movies that you kind of can't stop thinking about once you see it, and it just keeps getting better and better as you think about it. Adam Sandler, who I normally cannot stand, is phenomenal in this movie. One of the best performances and one of the best characters of the year. This movie is just like total stress inducer, so I don't know how much I'll rewatch this movie, but oh my gosh. There's something about it that gets in your brain and you can't stop thinking about it, and also the last like 5 to 10 minutes are so intense, and the final image of the movie kind of gives you a lot to think about and look back at the rest of the movie in a different light. Number 4, we have The Lighthouse. And Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe going crazy in a lighthouse in the 1890s is something that I wasn't sure that I needed. Maybe I thought I needed it, but now that I've seen it, I needed it. This is another one of those movies that gets in your head, and the score and the atmosphere and the way it's shot, all of it just the costumes even, just everything brings you into it, to the point that anytime I see a still from this movie or a scene on YouTube or something, it just pulls me back in and I want to watch it again. I almost went to see it again in theaters, but the thing that kept me from doing that is I need to watch it again with subtitles, because a lot of this movie is said in really thick like sailor accents with a lot of like old-timey terminology that I just couldn't catch, and I don't think I would catch without subtitles. I'd say there's probably like 50% of the dialogue in this movie that just like, whoop, nope, didn't hear it, because can't understand them. But this movie is so trippy in all the good ways that like you leave it and you're like, I have no clue what I just watched, but at the same time you can't help but think about maybe this means that, this means that. There are a lot of people who have come up with interpretations that I wouldn't even have come close to getting, but that's kind of like the magic of this movie, is that everyone has a different interpretation of it, so this is definitely one that I'm going to be rewatching a lot. Getting into the top 3, we have number 3, which is El Camino. Film buffs are probably rolling their eyes because apparently people just like this movie, but for whatever reason, I loved this movie. I'm a relatively new Breaking Bad fan. I binged the whole series in, I think, 2 weeks a couple months back, and I wanted to give some time before I watched El Camino, but when I did, I was surprised at how attached I'd become to the world, but also the characters, because I just got sucked back in, and I realized how much I missed all of this stuff. This movie made me realize that I care for characters I didn't know I cared about, like Skinny Pete and Badger. Had no clue that I cared about those guys until I watched this movie. Number 2, we have Knives Out, written and directed by Rian Johnson, who wrote and directed The Last Jedi and Brick and Looper. Haven't seen Brick and Looper, but I love The Last Jedi. My gosh, his sensibilities for dialogue and tone and style are just, they're up here, man. The cast in this is one of the best of the year by far. The ensemble that he gets together for this is crazy. This whodunit set in this old-timey secluded house with this family that you're not sure if you should like or not. This is also one of the most fun movies to watch with an audience. The first time I saw it, the audience was laughing the whole time. Then I went with my parents to see it again because I wanted to see their reactions. They loved it. This movie is a crowd pleaser for sure. Number 1, my favorite movie of the year, Marriage Story. As soon as the first trailer for this movie came out, my anticipation skyrocketed and it became one of my most anticipated of the year. And oh my gosh, it's incredible. It's written and directed by Noah Baumbach, and he did such an amazing job with the dialogue, having so many dialogue scenes and all of it feels so natural and so real. But also he does so many things with his direction that just add to the characters, things as simple as like closing a cabinet, that adds so much to a character, and it's crazy. Also has what I think is the best performance of the year, and that is Adam Driver as Charlie. Oh my gosh. He's one of my favorite actors working right now, but this just cemented him as probably one of the best. Joaquin Phoenix did an incredible job as the Joker, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the Oscar for it. But Adam Driver just blew my mind. Not just in the big argument scenes where you expect an actor to go crazy, but like the small moments are what really brought it home for me and actually got me emotionally. Definitely started choking up at the end when Adam Driver is reading a letter. Oh, that's all I'll say. But oh my gosh. This is also one of the movies that I've wanted to rewatch the most since watching it. I'm going to be watching this movie for years. And even though I've only seen it once, I think it might be one of my favorite movies of all time. So that's it. That's all the movies I saw in 2019. Let me know what movies you saw in 2019. If you want to rank them, that would be awesome. I'd love to see like your top 5, top 10, something like that. Obviously, our lists are going to be different, but that's what's fun about looking at other people's lists. That's why I made this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys the next time that I see you.